Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of the Belgian Football podcast. My name is Ben Jackson, I'll be your host, and once again I'm joined by Scott and Joris. Guys, how are you doing this evening?
Hi guys, hello everybody, hope you're all well. It's been another wild week in Belgian football, hasn't it? A week that saw a player baring his cheeks to us and the tattoo on one of those cheeks. And when I say cheeks, I don't mean his face. And we also, of course, had the referee's evaluation report being leaked, which fairly set the cat amongst the pigeons, didn't it, guys?
It definitely did. And for me, it's an incredibly busy day and busy week, but power through, and I'm happy to have some time for the podcast at least to get some easier going things going on.
Let's hope we don't rack your brain too much. No, it's good to chat over these things, and I can't say I've read the referee's leaked report or whatever it is, and I'm just bored of talking about referees and all that nonsense. It's like everything's just popping up all the time, isn't it? But I feel like we're going to talk about them again, unfortunately, in this episode. Let's quickly go through the results from round 25. St. Truiden, they beat Kortrijk 1-0 on Friday evening. Stade Liège got their first win under Ivan Leko. They beat Leuven 1-0 at home. Union Saint-Gilloise drew 2-2 in a controversial game with Westerlo. Club Brugge beat Eupen 4-0 at home. Antwerp on Sunday went to Molenbeek, battered them 4-0. That had a little bit of a fallout from that one. Mechelen drew 1-1 with Genk. Anderlecht beat Charleroi 3-1 away from home. And Cercle Bruges beat Ghent 2-1. Let's start with the St. Truiden against Kortrijk game at the Dio Wasabi Stein Stadium. Still can't really get used to saying that. But lots of obvious talk kind of before the game about the plastic pitch and all that. And quite nice because obviously Kortrijk Newman Fossum obviously has played a lot in Norway, and he was like, well, we kind of have to play on these pitches up there because it's so hard to play during the winter if you've got grass and stuff like that. So it was kind of nice for someone to actually be like, oh, it just doesn't matter. Kortrijk obviously coming into this one on good form. Had a couple of chances. They did test Suzuki, who was back between the sticks for St. Truiden and making some quality saves, as we kind of know he is capable of. Pilard in the other goal, he made a couple of fine saves as well. Not much he could do about the only goal of the game, though. Fantastic whipped ball in from Abubakar Koita. Fuji gets the flick on. Unfortunately, Fuji's playing for Kortrijk, not for St. Truiden. Apologies to kind of confuse people who probably presume it's a Japanese player. He's probably playing for St. Truiden. He's actually playing for Kortrijk. He heads it into his own net. And that is the only goal of the game. Finishes 1-0 to St. Truiden. Kortrijk, like I said, they did have plenty of chances. Pilard made a couple of good saves for them. He's obviously the new kind of number one for the side. And it feels like it's almost like kind of Groundhog Day for Kortrijk, where it's around this time of the season where they kind of flick the kind of goalkeepers around. And we obviously had Tom Vandenberg taking over from Illich last year, despite Illich playing quite well this year. And now we've got Pilard is kind of taking over as the side's number one from Vandenberg for the time being. But it looks like he will be kind of number one going forward from kind of all the chatter that's coming out of the club at the moment. Kind of halts Kortrijk's little resurgence, doesn't it, guys? Whereas for St. Truiden, it just kind of keeps them in the hunt for playoff one. Stops a little bit of a kind of conceding slide as well from last weekend.
I think in truth this wasn't the most entertaining game of the weekend. I don't think many people will disagree with us about that. St. Truiden marginally the better side offensively, I think, and probably just about deserved it. Kortrijk's first defeat in 5, the first defeat for Freyr Alexanderson, of course, who, you know, as Ben was saying, they've been on a pretty good run. Things have been improving for them. Although the overall situation although it's looking more positive, they're not quite there yet. Although I was having a look at some of their numbers today, and they have improved defensively. So in that sense, they've definitely given themselves a real chance now. You know what I mean? They're not the pushovers that they once were before. They're obviously not scoring a lot of goals, which continues to make things difficult for them. But they really have kind of tightened up at the back, which at least gives them a chance of picking up more points. And because of the general feeling around the club, as we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks, I think they'll probably still fancy their chances looking at their fixtures, the last 5 fixtures as well to go. They've got Union Saint-Gilloise at home, Mechelen, Molenbeek, Antwerp and Anderlecht. So there's a couple of games in there that they will probably fancy their chances with of possibly getting a couple of wins. St Truden will be glad to get another home win under their belt because it's been a while really, and their form has started to become a wee bit more patchy, I think.
I would say there's only one game winnable for them at the moment in this streak, and was going to use the schedule as why they're probably, that the schedule is not in their favor in comparison to the other sides. There was a nice graph last week as well from the Pro League itself, I think, even that gave the last fixtures and like the average position of the opponents. And it was not looking great for Kortrijk there either. And Sint-Truiden was then already a more winnable game, as you could hear from Scott's list there as well. Like then the game I'm talking about is of course the game against Molenbeek. Our WDM, they definitely have some chance there. And anyway, they're at this stage that they have a chance in every game, but I feel like there's too many big hitters in there to consistently be able to sneak points from them, and even a point won't be enough. They will need some few wins out of that. So it's not looking so great for them despite their run at the moment. But again, I think they will already be happy that they're still, of course, in the relegation playoffs. Then their opponents are the same and are from a different caliber, and so that they will be happy to play those teams and still be within a shout of safety, hopefully for them, by the time that these playoffs come. And maybe they've proven they can go for an upset once in a while, of course, but I don't really see it happening. Then I was also going to mention, like Scott said, going forward, still an issue. They will really have to rely on their defense and then take a few of the chances they get, a bit more than they usually do. The game against Club Brugge, the only exception actually there in the last so many games, the last 2 streaks. Remarkable in a way that the second year in a row that Kortrijk lose against Sint-Truiden at Stadium because of an own goal with 1-0. Last year it was Van den Berge himself who scored the own goal. And to touch on that as well, of course, he, in comparison to last year, Van den Berge went out of goal because of an injury. I do not know exactly how the injury status itself is, of course, but the reason for the initial change, of course, was that there was an injury. So that's probably a different beast to compare, or a different thing compared to last year. Sint-Truiden, on the other hand, 22nd, 2 points at home now, not a bad points haul. 8 home games in a row, undefeated as well, so they really have something going there. And sniffing at the Champions playoffs, of course. But for that, I will touch on the other side of the coin from a good home streak when you're not top in the real top of the league. The away form there really needs to improve. They only got 2 wins so far. They really need to add to that tally to be able to actually reach these playoffs, which would already be a remarkable feat for them and an unbelievable feat for them, actually, considering how we looked at them at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in recent weeks we've seen some great play from Fujita in the midfield. I think he's been quite a nice little kind of starting more games and kind of playing quite well in there. Kind of just a bit of kind of steal. I guess they have a lot of like nice, pretty kind of players and stuff like that. And you got him kind of just mucking things around and stuff like that, which is always nice. And then we almost saw another goal for Giuseppe Barnes, guys. I don't know if you saw on the highlights. One kind of cleared off the line, sort of, kind of. I think it was just under with the clearance, like blocking it, and then he had an even better chance, like an absolute free header, and he absolutely like 50p headed it. Just came. I don't know how he got it, where he got it, but it just went so wide. I was just like, oh man, poor bloke. I was kind of. It'd be nice to see like him get on a little bit of a scoring run after getting his first goal in an absolute kind of demolishing by Cercle Bruges. But hey, some good signs that he's kind of getting in and about there, and maybe he'll grab a couple more before the end of the season. Speaking of kind of bad misses, let's talk about probably one of the best goals of the weekend. That happened in Standard Liège against Leuven. Aidan O'Neill absolutely ridiculous strike from him. Just the technique on this volley. I can't really describe it. I don't think I can really describe it well enough to kind of give it the credit it deserves. It was such a good goal at about the 20th minute of the game into the top corner, giving Lesson pretty much no chance with stopping it. He had made a couple of really good saves in this game. Bodart had a couple of easy ones to make, kind of like to and fro between both sides. They both had their chances. Leuven a little bit wasteful, especially at the end of the game. There was a chance that Wout Bruns was running three and Mertens decided that he was going to shoot from the halfway line instead. And it's like, you're 1-0 down, you're in a relegation scrap. Why are you shooting from the halfway line? Like, it was such a bad shot. Like, we also, I think, probably need to touch on the state of the pitches this week as well. This pitch was particularly bad, particularly bobbly and particularly kind of muddy. And I guess St. obviously, there was never going to be a problem with the pitch because it's the plastic pitch, but this one and a couple of other ones were really, really bad. And it kind of took away a bit, I think, from some of the games, some of the ability to play. But Ivan Neko gets his first win of the season. Not the most emphatic win. It did take that wonder strike from Aidan O'Neill, but it gives them some breathing space at least from that bottom four.
Yeah, well, from one average game to another average game, and a moment of real quality being the difference. Aidan O'Neill's goals, Ben was saying, brilliant goal, really great technique, instinctive, I think. One of those finishes you think, yeah, didn't have much time to think about that, really.
Goal of the season for me so far, even.
There you go.
I would go as far.
There you go. So that's how good it was. If you haven't seen it, go and check it out. We might even retweet a link to it later. Yeah, I think Standard just about deserved to win. I think this one, Ivan Leko afterwards saying how pleased he was to see smiling faces after the game. The first time he's experienced that since he's come to Sclesien. And he will hope that this is the beginning of a turning point for them. Their fixture list up to the playoff standards isn't too bad. They've got Westerlo, Union, Gent, Genk and Eupen before the playoffs. Two of those are home games and three are away. Leuven, on the other hand, that 2-game winning streak, which has been their longest winning streak for forever, pretty much, has ended. They haven't won 3 games in a row all season. It's continued to be a problem for them. Joris highlighted this last week and said he wasn't betting on it going to 3 games this week. Statistically, it was looking a bit far. But the positives for me for them. Sieb Schrijvers, decent game, and again Toby Lyson, who's continued to be, I think, one of the few arguably reasonably consistent shining lights for them now, having another really decent game this weekend.
Yeah, so not that much to add because, like Scott mentioned, quite an average game, not really great. Except for that goal, already dubbed it here, maybe potential goal of the season. Just because of yes, you sometimes see those strikes from distance, and especially here, there's a bit of luck, or he mishits it or anything. But here you could feel like he was totally in control, and yeah, that makes it at least look. Of course, that's still that ball still could have gone out of the stadium, but it looked like it was all that natural, and then how it went in, the eye liked that goal. That was also the only moment in the game I think that the eye liked there, but the eyes even. But the other things already mentioned, I guess, that losing or the not winning streak that we talked about last week broken. I would also here goal might be enough for safety for them now as well, which is already bad enough to mention that for Standard, of course. But given the season they had, I guess that's probably not so bad. In the amount of points they are ahead, that's not necessarily the case yet. Usually you will also need a bit more points to really be safe than the 28 they have now. But is it 28? I think so. Given the amount of teams that are between them and the danger zone now, I think that should be enough. And then the other streak, so the negative streak from Standard is broken, the positive streak from Leuven as well. Scott already touched on that as well. And probably at the worst moment for them that happened. Of course, if the result would have gone differently, even maybe even with a draw, it would already be a different story for both sides' fates. But just an overall bad performance from Leuven anyway. So I don't think they really deserved anything out of this one.
Yeah, and it's kind of, if that was their run, do you know what I mean? If those 2 wins were their kind of streak at the end of the season to try and get themselves away, they built up no kind of distance from the other teams below them because they're still on 24 points. And you look at kind of...
Well, the run was 11 points out of 5 games, so it goes a bit further, but nonetheless.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? It's not like, it's just not...
It's half their points tally, basically, so that's not enough for the rest of the season.
How depressing is that? Yeah, and you kind of look at the players they brought off the bench as well. Like, he literally chucked all the kind of strikers on, like Wout Bruins, Muenta, Apoku. Remember, like Apoku was the starting striker at the beginning of the season. It's barely seen any Apoku since kind of Oscar Garcia took over. So yeah, it's the fact that they were trying to swap out Bruins for Benjamin Tete at the deadline kind of says it all still, doesn't it? So they are definitely not out of the woods at all. And a poor performance is kind of, you just get concerned again, don't you? You start to think, oh, maybe they've kind of turned it around and they'll keep playing well. But you just, the way this league's going this season, you can't really discount anyone until it's done. It's kind of like, I don't know if you guys have been watching, but I'm sure people have been watching The Traitors on BBC, where you have to pick who do you think are the traitors. It's kind of like that for this season's relegation thing. You might be like, you're 100% safe or you're 100% a faithful, but in fact they're going down, they're a traitor. So yeah, you just don't know until the end of the game. That's what you have to be. You have to be kind of suspicious of all the teams until they can prove to you that they're not what you think they are. One side who's really done well to kind of move themselves away from that kind of relegation scrap and start to build a little bit of a buffer are Westerlo. They travelled to Brussels to face Union Saint-Gilloise. Took the lead thanks to Ross Sykes, just giving the ball away for no reason. Just trying to play a back pass to Maurice that was never going to reach him. I think even if no one had intercepted it and Maurice had stood still, I don't think it'd have reached him. It was that poorly played. I think it was Vermaat that kind of jumps in on it, then gets taken out by Maurice. Thankfully for him, it falls to Van den Kabus, who puts it in to make it 1-0. Although I'm pretty sure it would have been a penalty anyway, because Vermaat just gets absolutely battered by Maurice. But good advantage played by the referee. Let's give them a little bit of credit before we talk about other things in this game. Good advantage played by the ref. Van den Kabus scores. Union do get back into the game like Lapoussin with some lovely feet, little 1-2 with, I think it was Rasmussen or Nielsen, I can't remember which one of those two it was, but one of those guys plays it back to him, he tucks it in to make it 1-1. Turnaround's kind of complete in the 59th minute. Lapoussin with some more nice feet in the box to kind of take the ball down, flick it around the defender and then tuck it in to make it 2-1. Looks like despite not playing their best, Union are going to escape with a win, and then there's a clash between a couple of players on the edge of the box. Nothing is given initially. VAR intervenes, call the referee over, and unlike if people have been watching the Africa Cup of Nations, where even when the referee goes to the VAR screen, you don't actually know what they're going to give, because they're well more than happy to see the replay, but they may stick with a completely different decision because it's their interpretation, which was very, very refreshing. But then I had to remember we're back in European football, and if they go over to the screen, that's it. The decision is going to be changed. Westerlo get given a penalty. Madsen, he just doesn't miss from the spot these days. He makes it 2-2. Union still have a chance to win. We spoke a little bit about Nielsen last week, didn't we? How we said we think he's good at Union, but would he be great elsewhere? And I feel like this finish kind of confirmed my kind of feelings about him not being that great elsewhere, because he really should have scored and he just blasts it almost into the woods behind the goal there. Finishes 2-2. It's kind of, Union have been winning and not playing well, and everything's been kind of like they're winning but they're not playing well, so it's fine. But the moment this kind of draw happened, and even then they still probably could have won the game very, very easily. We're now like, oh, are we getting the title race? Are they faltering now? It's like all that sort of stuff. So they finally dropped some points, gives everyone else kind of a lifeline. But Scott, it was not without controversy, was it?
Not at all. And I have to say that penalty, I don't know how many times I've watched the replays. All of the angles are awful, but awful angles aside, it just wasn't a penalty for me.
It was for me too.
Well,
Very
it's
clearly
interesting.
one for me even.
I mean,
So I'll
it's
go in
interesting.
the
Yeah.
discussion straight away. Clear Stonewall penalty for me. I don't see why there's so many things going about it, because it's a collision in the box. The attacker gets blocked by the defender, and that's it. The ball is the attacker is the first on the ball, and yeah, I mean, I don't get why there's so much fuss about this one.
I think it's an interesting one, and I will counter in the spirit of us having a good debate here, which listeners will enjoy, I'm sure. For me, my initial reaction was it's a pen, and then when I looked at it more, I thought, and the more I saw it, the more I moved further away and thought this is just a coming together. To me, there was no clear error, hence why VAR should never have got involved, because the referee's instinct was no anyway until he got reined back in. So the whole thing was
Well,
a bit of a mess for me. I think
that's a lot.
Blesson.
Like, that's another debate. I think the referee held out his decision for the VAR, which he shouldn't do. But
Yeah,
okay, that's the regulation
yeah.
issue as well. I guess
I
that's a
think you're
step.
right, Joris. I think that highlights obviously one of the problems about VAR generally, we know, in that it should only come into play if there's a clear error, which there wasn't. So referees are now hesitant and waiting to see if they get called in their earpiece, which is not something that should be happening either. So it just adds to the kind of confusion. But yeah, for me, I lean almost entirely with Alexander Blesson into it not being a pen and it being a bit of a joke. But that's the beautiful thing about football. Joris is absolutely cast iron certain, as am I the other way, and Ben will sit in the fence as he should, because he's the host. But on the game itself, Blesson was pretty frustrated afterwards. He did go as far as to call it a joke penalty, and you can make your own mind up on that one. A lot of people, I think, that I've seen this week in the aftermath felt that it wasn't in the end. Westerlo, I did feel deserved something out of the game. I thought they were pretty decent again. Their form continues to be, on the whole, kind of quite good. They really gave Union a game, who made it difficult for themselves, of course. Giving away that early goal. I bet the board at Westerlo are wishing that they brought in Rick DeMille a few weeks earlier than they had done. They're probably wondering, where might we be now if this progression had started a little bit earlier. Union's Luc Lapassan having a good game aside from his 2 goals. I thought he was pretty good. Swinging back to Westerlo, another player who impressed me, Romeo Vermaat, again, really good. 2 goals and 1 assist in his 5 games so far. We know Rick DeMille knows what to do with Romeo Vermaat, knows how to motivate him and deploy him. But the one thing I want to highlight with Vermaat, and again, it was when I was looking at the numbers a bit today, his defensive numbers are really good. He's really good at doing the stuff that, coaches love players doing, particularly strikers, who sometimes shy away from doing this sort of work. He's really good at tracking back and putting his foot in when you need him to as well. And that's a really underrated aspect of his game. And it's probably one of the reasons why Rick DeMille is such a big fan of him.
Yeah, and well, most of the other things already have been mentioned now that I had. Union still somehow struggling to pull the games over the lines after going behind, though, as well, which is not very unusual. Of course, they don't get behind that often. That helps for that statistic, but I think they've only managed to win I don't have the exact statistics here, but 3 or 4 games after going behind. Amura hitting the woodwork for the 5th time as well. They also hit it another time this game. So in this game, they were a bit unlucky in their finishing, of course, despite, of course, Nielsen should have scored that last one as well, which would have saved a lot of discussion, which was for me anyway not needed. But okay, I'll have to to settle for that. But Westerlo actually were one of those teams that actually led twice against Union. Last time they did manage to turn it around. This time not, but they might be even the only team where that happened to this season. I'm not completely sure there, but definitely were the mention. Westerlo definitely have found some ingredients to upset that defense at least. And so around the penalty, regardless of whether it was his Madsen's 7th penalty, and he scored all 7 of them. So, and he's Westerlo's top scorer with 11 goals as well. So he added a few extra goals as well. and every point counts for them now as well. Ben mentioned the buffer that they would have in comparison to Leuven. The gap between the two teams is not even one game, so that's how thin the margins are at the moment, already at the bottom.
I think it's worth highlighting here as well, just while we're kind of talking about Union. Ben was referring to, a lot of the chat this week about, is this the start of a wobble? And we don't really know the answer to that, but they do have a slightly more busy fixture schedule, of course, because they're still fighting on all three fronts. They've got Eintracht Frankfurt twice coming up, and obviously they've got the second leg of the cup semi-final. So they are, if this is the beginning of a sticky spell for them, it's coming at a point that they don't want. And we know they don't like to water down the side at all. They always put their strongest side out, generally speaking, as well. And they've always responded well to those extra games and that extra pressure that's demanded of them. And we're going to find out over probably the next couple of weeks, whether those extra fixtures are going to play into the rest of the season for them.
Yeah, and it will give us a nice excuse if they get knocked out and then they go on a good winning streak. We can use a title like a blessing in disguise. Already looking ahead to that. I'm like, we must have used that at some point, but maybe we'll have to bring it back. I'm sure we must use it when he was at Ostend, but we'll have to dig back through the archives there. Joris just like rolling his eyes. He's sick of mine and Scott's terrible kind of title ideas that we come up with every single week.
Oh my God. On the subject of that, I was so pleased I was so smug last week when it came to me. Bisonness as usual. I thought that was one of the best ones yet. Well, from me anyway, and I'm going to find it hard to top that.
So this is, if you do like our titles of our things, do let us know, because it will give Scott a great deal of joy to know that it's been well received. If you don't like them, just don't say anything. Just keep it to yourself. If you do like it, do let us know.
I'll just keep on face palming.
Yeah. Just know that Joris, is rolling his eyes every single time. Another game where there was some controversy around refereeing decisions. Whether it actually impacted the end result is kind of up to everyone else to decide, I guess. Club Brugge hosted Eupen. Usually a fixture where Eupen actually kind of like going there sometimes. They've kind of, a couple of years ago, had a decent run. Obviously last season, not so great. And kind of since then, it's kind of just been horrific for them facing Club Brugge. Looked like maybe Mignolet could have been sent off in the first couple of minutes. I don't know. Charles Cook, who's arguably been one of Eupen's best players this season, despite actually not getting much game time. He goes through, Mignolet comes out. Does he hand it? I've tried to watch the replay enough times to actually see if he does handball it or not outside of the box. Kofeld's convinced. Dyler didn't see it. But then he did come up.
Managers should really stop using that. Nobody believes
so
you. You have all 7 iPads on your bench. And so
the moment they need one little decision to go away, they're replaying all the stuff. But then he did come out and say like there's some strange things going on in the Belgian Pro League at the moment, and start talking about other things.
Yeah, it's very difficult to get away with that one when we know, because everyone sees it every week, that most T1s sit beside the video analyst for that very reason, because when you get moments like this, that's the first person that they turn to.
And I mean, it was in third minute. If it would be in the final minute, okay, I might cut you some slack, but now like you had time enough, at least in the break or whatever, still, if you did it at the beginning already.
It's a strange one, isn't it? Because I guess it's one of those, maybe we don't want VAR to intervene in those sort of situations. I don't know. Do we just want them to do offsides and kind of stuff like that? But then it's kind of like, it's a big moment. And if he has handled it outside of the box, it's denying a goal scoring opportunity. So he probably should have been sent off. But I was trying to watch the replay closely enough to see if he did actually handle it. I just couldn't quite it looked like he did, but then I'm like, they would have watched that, and I'm sure, like, yes, let's just chuck these conspiracy theories out the window about all the referees favour Club Brugge, blah, blah, blah. Like, I think they would have done something about that, because there's no way they'd have got away with all the kind of scrutiny on them at the moment. That I think they would have looked at it a lot closer. Kofeld, to be fair to him, said, yeah, that should have gone away, but apart from that, we were not the better team, and Club Brugge were totally better than us. To be fair, that was kind of helped by Kevin Mervald, who I don't think he's ever played for a team in blue and black. I don't know if RW Erfurt play in blue and black. I presume that's Rot-Weiss Erfurt, so I presume they play in red and white. But he, for some reason, felt like he was going to play for Club Brugge in the first couple of minutes because the ball came into the box and he just saw Nielsen. He was like, you know what, I'm just going to chest this down to you so nicely and you can just smash it in to make it 1-0. So it was a lovely assist from Kevin Mervald. Was that his first assist of the season, maybe? I don't know. No, he's already had one. So 2 assists for Kevin Mervald this season. Jukla then makes it 2-0 after save from Slonina is just kind of given straight to him, so he taps it in. And then, I guess, kind of the phrase for Olsen's goal, it's a lovely finish, but the build-up is probably, we should talk about open. I think probably the more kind of technical, accurate phrase is just dicking about at the back. I don't know what they were doing. Like, they're playing it around at the back, and then honestly, Van Genechten, like, if you've seen, it's honestly the funniest thing. He just, like, there's no pressure on him. He just boots it up in the air back towards his own defenders. Like, he's got the line to go down. He's got like anywhere to go on the pitch. He just turns around, like, launches it in the air. They obviously then lose the ball because it's just chaos at the back. Olsen picks it up and smashes it in, and then Van den Mechelen turns into a hold up centre forward for one of the other for this final goal. Corner comes in, the ball drops to him. He like brings it down his chest calmly, and he's just in the box, like no one's putting any pressure on him. Calmly brings it down, sprays it back wide. Cross comes in, he meets it with his head, puts it in, makes it 4-0 to Club Brugge. Just far too easy. Like all these goals are far too easy. Urban did have some chances. Like, let's be fair to them, they had the chances. But Scott, I know you've got a great stat that you're probably going to bring up here because it's completely relevant to this game. But the defending was just horrid. That Olsen goal was just, it's just, we've spoken about them playing out from the back and how horrible it is to watch and how dangerous it is. And they're still doing it and they're still losing and they're still conceding. And it's just like, maybe it's time to just chuck that out the window and go a little bit more direct. Like, you've got Finn Bogerson, Emond when he's back fit. I don't think he was fit, was he? But when he's back fit, you got a bit more physicality up front. Maybe you just ditch this whole playing yourself into trouble, because they really did so many times in this game, and Club Brugge were more than happy to take a 4-0 victory.
Well, Florian Kohfeldt was quite angry after this, mainly because of the Mignolet incident. But to me, these things are kind of more of a symptom of a coach who's under real pressure and really needs some results for some relief. Which they didn't get much of here because it was a pretty dominating Club Brugge performance, again, which they've been mostly recently dominating the sides they've been playing. I thought the front three, Skov, Olsen, Jukla and Skoras, all had pretty good games. And Ben mentioned a stat that I pulled out today when I was looking at some of my numbers, as I always do in preparation for recording. Eupen's third game without scoring, which in itself isn't unusual, but they haven't scored 2 goals in a game since October. And when you're struggling to score, that just tells you what you need to know, really. I think we're beyond the point of being worried about them now. I think it's I think it's over for them, really.
Ooh, that's a hot take, but also, well, let's say lukewarm take, maybe.
I'll take that. Lukewarm's better.
Yeah, the last 3 games against Club Brugge, is also a three goalless games for them to stay in that 3 goalless thirds. And in that time they conceded 16. So yeah, that's not great. Ben alluded to it in the beginning already as well, but that's to put it really out there. Yeah, good to see the Kuiper and Nusa back in the starting 11, I guess, for various reasons. They actually both a bit for injury reasons or injury concerns at least. They were back, and yeah, it looks like that everything went well as far as I didn't hear any kind of backlash from it, especially for the Kuiper. That is only a week after he had to be carried off against Antwerp. Yeah, then the Mignolet red card. Well, I kind of think it does hit his arm or his hand, but also that it's not straight away, so that it comes from another body part. I don't think that it should play a role anymore in this, but who can still follow with these things anyways. But yeah, nonetheless, yeah, maybe. But yeah, actually their level was not in general was not as bad as is reflected in the scoreline. I think Ben also mentioned that a little bit as well. The bigger issue for them might be, I don't know if there's any updates on that, given Eupen's social media presence, most likely not. The Manier injury that really could hamper the rest of their season as well. To add insult to injury there as well. And yeah, wish him well. Of course, hope he gets better soon. And yeah, that's that he can still contribute to their season as well. Anyway, because they will definitely need him. They can't do without one of their better players for sure in the situation they're in. As Scott already deemed them, that they would be going down, and it's not a very surprising take at this stage of the season, I guess.
I think one of the reasons that I do think they're gone, and I'm glad Joris said lukewarm, because it means that if they do stay up, then it's not such a hot take. It's a mild take. But yeah, I think one of the reasons I think that is, Joris was talking about Gary Manier. I think today it was confirmed, not how many weeks, but it was confirmed that I think he's going to miss. There's a real chance he'll miss the rest of the season, if not most of it, and that's pretty bad news for them, because he's actually quite an important player for them.
Yeah, super versatile. Just can do lots of different things on the pitch. Kind of like a Swiss Army knife, isn't he? And I think he's quite an underrated kind of player.
Yeah.
For many. And I think he'll be one of those players that if they do go down, I can imagine lots of kind of mid to lower table Pro League sides will look at him and think, yeah, that'd be quite a nice addition to the squad, because he can just kind of slot in most places. Although they are playing Ghent next, guys, so maybe we shouldn't stick a fork in them just yet, because the way Ghent are going, it's kind of, who knows what's going to happen. But then they've got Cercle, Anderlecht, St. Truden and Standard. Like, that's, not the easiest of run-ins. Like, they could maybe be, like, St. Truden, second to last game of the season, they may be completely out of any contention for anything at that point. So they that might be a winnable game. But we're talking about a side that last year went to Club Brugge needing to not lose, or that they could stay up with losing, and they decided to just lose 6-0 and just got very, very lucky that Cercle Brugge won, because that wasn't a given either.
7-8
I think
even, I think.
they're a side that maybe a bit Solangi, in that you kind of do worry if they do go down, like what are the ramifications for that club as a whole. And it's kind of maybe looking a bit broader. It's nice to have a club from that region in kind of the Pro League and having like a footballing presence, because it's not the biggest region in Belgium, is it? There's not, like, the German speaking region isn't massive. So it's been quite nice to have them around. But I'm very much there like you, Scott. I've got my fork ready to put in them, and I think that Ghent game could confirm whether I'm sticking it in or not. So we will see. But it could be an interesting one. Hopefully, Manu does get better. Another side that they're not quite done, are they? They've still got some kind of time. But they're kind of running out of it, and we don't really know what they're doing anyway. Molenbeek against Antwerp. They welcomed Antwerp. The last game, it proved to be for Claudio Cacapa in charge of Molenbeek. He was sacked after they were battered by Antwerp. They lost this one 4-0. They had a couple of chances, but Deforney was pretty busy. He had a lot of things to do, and I think it's unsurprising that after this, the kind of fan groups came out, and while the boycott might be a bit extreme, and I know that not all Molenbeek fans are kind of on board with this. I know a lot of them have said this is actually a bit, you've co-opted us rather than kind of consulting all of us, because not all of us want to miss the game. Some of us do want to still go. But they came out and said that the players aren't playing as if they care about the club. And I think this performance is quite telling, to be honest. Ondrejka, nice to see him back amongst the starting lineup for Antwerp. He gets brought down early on, penalty. Alderweireld thankfully took it. He doesn't miss them, unlike his good friend Vincent Janssen. Although he does miss them in the Champions League, but not in just not in the Pro League. Thought I'd make sure I remembered that one before I start waxing lyrical about his penalties, because we all remember that. Janssen then makes it 2-0 within 36 minutes. Deforney maybe could have done better, but again, state of the pitch, I feel like it just bobbled over his hand, so a bit unfair. Ondrejka then gets his goal with a nice tap in at the back post to make it 3. I think for that it's the third goal, isn't it? Where Sambu is just, I don't know why he stood where he is, but he plays Janssen on miles, and like everyone else has a perfect line at the back for them, and Sambu's like so far back, he's just completely out of the picture that he plays in miles on side. Janssen crosses, Andrzejka scores. Janssen's then fouled for the next penalty, I believe it was, or was it someone else? Someone else gets fouled for a penalty in the box. Initially, it's given as offside. Then VAR intervenes and said, no, it's actually a penalty. Alderweireld scores that. Felipe Sampaio on loan, obviously from you know who in January. Can't say I've really noticed him at all until this game where he gets himself sent off. And he protests it. It's really weird. Like he just takes out one of the Antwerp players who's on the break and he's the last man, gets booked, and he's like, how can you book me for that? It's like, because you're the last man. Like, it's an everyday booking, run of the mill thing. He gets sent off. It's just awful performance from Molenbeek. Like really, really poor. Not surprised that the fans are quite concerned. We spoke last week about we didn't really understand their transfer policy and all their kind of only signing players from kind of the clubs that they're linked with, and I think that ultimately could really cost them this year. They're just no cohesion, and the fans have come out and said they feel like the identity's been completely ripped out of the club. There's no kind of identity; they can't really identify with it. So it's looking pretty bleak, and they might not have any fans for the next game. The names being bandied about are not exactly exciting. They're not exactly kind of people you think they're definitely going to be kept up, because Scott, I think we were talking about, we think there's probably is actually enough quality in that squad to keep them up, but whether the collective nature of the squad can be gelled together to make some sort of semblance of a side is kind of up for debate, I guess.
Well, it's no surprise that they were truly awful this weekend, Molenbeek. I thought, particularly defensively, they looked like a side to me who dialed out. Now, it's interesting that the fans have been talking a lot, particularly this week, about there being no passion there and not playing for the side. Sometimes these things, and I don't know if it's excuse me, I don't know if that's the case here, but sometimes these are examples of sides where the players just don't have the confidence of the coach anymore. And some of the body language in this game suggested to me that they weren't remotely interested kind of this weekend. And when you're on a run like the one they've been on, then cumulative defeats can mean things going only one way. Sort of winless in 8. Conceding 22 in that time and only scoring 6. I mean, it's easy to see what the problems are. And looking at it, I just wonder now whether they've waited too long to sack Kikapa. That's kind of my feeling about it at the moment. It's a huge risk now making the change now. I understand it's probably the only thing they could do. It is a moment of panic, so you have to try a change, and it's only going to work if you get the right person. And I think at the moment, when you look at the list of names, I don't see anyone there that I think's really going to get them out of this. And if they're going to do it, it is going to be the hard way by winning the playoff. Which at the moment there's absolutely no guarantees they're going to do, no matter who comes in. So it's looking kind of quite grim for them. Ben was right to address the fact that I think there are actually quite a lot of pretty decent players in that squad who just haven't been performing enough over the course of the season for whatever reason. The big question for me is, have they left it too late to make the change and make the gamble? Looking at their fixtures, the 5 fixtures before the end of the season and the playoff point, there are 2 in the middle of that. They've got Leuven at home and Kortrijk away, which for me, they have to win both of those if they're going to have a chance, because the other games, Genk, Anderlecht and Cercle, there's no certs in either of those 3, but the 2 against those sides down in the bottom are completely non-negotiable for me.
Yep, I think I have to agree here with Scott. Definitely some the upcoming weeks will be exciting, and these two games I definitely need to win to increase the gap at least. And actually, if they win those, there might be a small fighting chance that they actually stay out of the relegation zone, depending on a lot of other results, of course. But still, win those games and maybe get a draw somehow out of one of the others might be enough. But yeah, not looking grim. The form they're in, like it's not completely unexpected. I think most people saw them going down at the beginning of the season as well, but they have overperformed. But will they overperform well or long enough? Will have overperformed long enough? More that actually, I guess, to stay out of trouble. Well, they're already in trouble, but to really to stay out of the of the relegation spots, it's yeah, it remains a question, but the answer looks to be written already down that they might not have done that, but we'll see. Yeah, this time the Fernie could not stop one of the penalties against Antwerp that they got. The Antwerp, in the reverse fixture, he got them to a point with saving 2 penalties, of course. So they conceded 4 penalties against Antwerp, and moreover, they conceded 13 penalties in total, which is by far the most. I don't not remember who was the second one anyway, but I do remember that that was 9 penalties. So that's they have, even with the second team in that list, have a gap of 4 penalties, and just 13 penalties in 25 games. So that's more than 1 penalty per 2 games. Yeah, you're not making it easier yourself like that, of course, even if the friendly once in a while saves one, as I said already as well. Yeah, 4 changes at the break, of course, also biting them in the ass in the end, because that caused them to not have any changes anymore for the injured Sissako, who was, I believe, also one of those 4 players coming on at that time as well. But yeah, that and led them to finish the game with only 9 men. Another thing that doesn't make it easier on yourself, even though by that time it didn't really matter for this game anymore anyway, and it didn't get worse than it already was going, I guess. But for Antwerp, things looking a lot brighter in recent weeks. First time they win 3 in a row this season. In the league, of course, that is because in that cup they actually did not win the cup tie they had against Ostende. They had a draw there in the. So the cup tie is still open, even though they have the best, the best hands to go through, as they're playing at home, and at home their reputation this season is still really good. And of course they're playing Ostende. With all due respect, of course, that looks like it's very much doable. But still touching on Ostende, then I know I shouldn't at the moment here. It's not the right place and time, but it's actually good that they're still in this tie. That's already a good feat for them, a good fight from them as well last week.
Yeah, that one finishing 1-1, like you said there. Joris, Ewan Henderson scoring again for Oostende. He just seems to be on absolute fire for them at the moment. The other tie finished 2-1 to Club Brugge against Union. So yeah, still all to play for in all those cup games, which is quite nice to see. I think that we've spoken. You mentioned those kind of 4 substitutes at half time. 3 of them, if I'm reading this rightly, were players that they brought in January. Like 3 of these were January signings. The back 4 was made up of 3 January signings, and they were horrendous. Like, one of those is a player we know from
encouraging.
David Souza must just be like, this isn't the Pro League kind of experience that I remember last time I was here. It was a little bit more toxic than over in Bruges. I think as well, if you're one of those challenger Pro League sides and you're looking at if it stayed the same as it is now, the bottom 4, like you'd probably fancy a go at Molenbeek in a kind of relegation playoff game, because you just think if you could kind of get ahead in that game or get them performing badly, it really is toxic there, and it's not just the fans. But it's very easy when things get toxic to just blame the fans. But I think we have to remember what happened at the beginning of the season. Like, this club's been in kind of turmoil since the season started. Like, the decisions that were made in the summer, and now the ramifications of those are being felt, and the fan base were vocal in the summer about how they were very angry about these changes. So I think the context needs to be remembered, doesn't it, when we're talking about these clearly very passionate fans that are very passionate for their club. They love their club. Like, we saw that they were very happy to get a game stopped. That's how angry they are at the moment with everything that's going on. So I do feel for them. because these performances are pretty horrendous. And there's nothing worse than seeing a team kind of almost just give up at home as well, like in the situation they're in, isn't pretty. Let's go to Mechelen against Genk. Obviously, Genk will be Molenbeek's next fixture. I think, guys, I'm fastly becoming a massive fan of Bill Antonio. I really enjoy watching Bill Antonio. Definitely not the finished product, that's for sure. Like, he's still some of his crosses are pretty all over the place. But I feel like it's just nice to see a Mechelen winger that just wants to do something with the ball and go forward and do that sort of stuff. It's what we're used to seeing from them. He was very much involved in their goal, but before that, Genk did actually take the lead from Tolu Alakudare. Ball comes in, kind of bobbles around a little bit. Eventually, he kind of taps it over the line to make it 1-0 to Genk. They have a couple of chances after that. Brian Hayden maybe should have scored. It was a quite nice play in the box. It falls to him to have a shot, but he just puts it wide. Cook had not that much to do in this game, didn't have to make that many saves, unfortunately for Genk. Mechelen's goal, though, that was pretty. That was really nice. And I think the goal score scoos from kind of the highlights that I saw, he seemed to be involved in a lot of good things that they were doing. It was kind of a bit more, you just see him getting on the ball more, and you know that things will happen for that side when he's very much involved in the play, and he seems to be getting back to the level that we expect from him. And I think that has translated into some of their kind of recent performances. Big Billy isn't involved, although Scott's calling him Wee Billy. So I think we're kind of on opposite ends of what we're calling him at this time. His ball, it's kind of overhit to Rabti, and Rabti realises that he's not going to be able to get this header on target, but if he knocks it down, Rob Scoos is there and he's just going to smash it in, and that's what happens. Pretty poor defending from Genk, like no one really picking up Scoos to kind of stop that. A couple more chances for both sides, but neither side's able to find a winner. So it finishes 1-1. Not great for Genk because they could have really caught up with another side that we'll talk about later. For Mechelen, if they'd managed to get the win, like we said last week, they would have been like, we'd have to have really seriously started speaking about them as potential playoff one candidates. But now the gap is still at 6 points, so that feels reasonably big at this point of the season. But there's still definitely a chance. Joris, obviously, we'll go to you first, even though obviously Scott does have the Mechelen kind of soft spot. We'll go to you first on this one. Your thoughts on Genk's 1-1 draw?
Well, both teams still have opposite fates in 2024. Still no loss for Mechelen in 2024. Still no win for Genk in 2024, which is a very sad thing. But I won't be going into too much into that either. But yeah, Ben already mentioned Schoofs. Yeah, he's also Mechelen's top scorer now with 6 goals. Yeah, and it should come to no surprise that this fixture ended on a draw, because it's the 5th time in a row that Mechelen Genk, so the home fixture for Mechelen, ends in a draw. And additionally, both sides have drawn a lot this season. It was Mechelen's 11th draw, if I'm not mistaken, and Genk's 10th. So yeah, that it really should not come as a surprise that this specific game ended in a draw. And yeah, for I think indeed it's in a way enough to keep Mechelen out of the playoff race. They will need 2 or even 3 games because of the winning the games won. I would presume so, even since all the draws were there, that they would have to catch up with in 5 games. And it's not in a relegation zone, but in the higher echelons of the classification. So yeah, that isn't looking really likely. But yeah, just the performance level of Genk, that it's just a terrible team to watch at the moment, to be honest. One of the worst sides to watch. It's as a fan, at least. As a neutral, I guess it's probably even worse. But yeah, that's it. It really like it was very undeserved that they took the lead there, of course, as well, to be honest. And then yeah, I guess Hanna should have scored that one, and that was like half a minute before the 1-1 fell, so that could have also given the results. Could have given the game a different outlook, of course, as well. But it was not to be, and yeah, that's a bit the story of Genk in 2024 so far.
Yeah, great analysis of the situation at Genk at the moment from our Joris. Few wee points on Mechelen just to balance the scales a little bit, as Ben was setting us up nicely for. As Joris was alluding to, they're undefeated in 6 now. Not a bad little run at all. And actually, we know they've improved under Besnik Hasse. He really has kind of worked pretty well with the limited resources at his disposal, and the fact that he had no real wiggle room from the moment he came in, really. Waiting obviously for some important players to come back. The obvious one being Nicholas Storm, of course, who could well be back at the end of this month. But yeah, 18 out of 33 points since Hazy came in, which all things considered actually isn't too bad. He felt quite strongly that they deserved to win the game this weekend. I don't really agree with him. I thought a draw was probably the fair result, even if Mechelen maybe did have the slightly better goal-scoring opportunities. Something to watch out for over the next few weeks. Besnik was talking about how he felt Islam Slimani, who got half an hour in this game, his first half hour. They didn't really play to his strengths, was one of the comments he made after the game. So expect to see a lot more balls thrown into the box in the coming weeks. The more game time he gets to cause a bit of chaos there. But yeah, things looking up for them. They're going to be all right now. And of course, another positive for them is Big Mori Kanate's back as well.
Yeah, a complete kind of turnaround for them, and they kind of can start planning ahead for next season, being in the Pro League, think about what they can do to kind of get back to being that kind of fun, exciting team. And I think we all know the answer is to find a striker that can put the ball in the bloody back of the net. That's been their problem all season. So hopefully they'll be doing some kind of scouting around to see who they can pick up there. Another side that just can't put the ball in the back of the net, and they had plenty of chances to put the ball in the back of the net, but they just couldn't do it. Charleroi, they hosted Anderlecht. However, the cat Coffee was back, but unfortunately the cat did mostly picking the ball out of his net. Thanks to some his defenders didn't actually help him much in this game. Jules Van Kleenput decided to put it through his own net after 6 minutes. And then the second goal, I can't remember who it was, who just, the ball from Hazard comes in, and like the defender, rather than like blocking off the run of Dolberg to clear the ball, just stands there looking at Coffee as if like he's going to come and get it. And then Dolberg's like, well, if you don't want it, I'll have it. So he just jumps in front and sticks in the back of the net. One of the defenders does actually then score. We kind of bemoaned their signings and said, oh, well, if they sign loads of defenders, they need to sign a striker. But little did we know, guys, that Achraf Dari is actually a striker in a defender's body, clearly. He scores to make it 2-1 just before half-time. And they had so many chances. Me and yours spoke about Dan Heyman's last week, how he just keeps hitting the post and stuff. This time he didn't hit the post, but he forced some decent saves from Kasper Schmeichel. I can't remember, they finished with something ridiculous. What was it? Yeah, like 17 shots, and they only scored 1 goal, and that was from like a set piece. If I remember rightly, from Dali. So quite frustrating for them. And as they were pushing, Anderlecht had quite a few more chances on the break that they just couldn't finish until Vasquez comes on, and his volley is it's a beautiful volley from him into the back of the net. Not as aesthetically pleasing as Aidan O'Neill. So I think Aidan O'Neill's is definitely the better goal. That's for sure. But that made it 3-1 to Anderlecht. And I think performance-wise, I think many people expected that if they lost this game, Mazzi would be out. And at the time of recording, he's not out. But I think performance-wise, you can kind of look at that game and be like, is it really the right decision to make? Because they just can't score. Like, he can't do anything. If he sets the team up to create chances, that's the best he can do. Like, he can't put the ball in the back of the net. He's not able to do that. He's got the kind of tools at his disposal to try and do that. He's putting the players on that he thinks could do that, but they're not doing it. So I think kind of on the outside, you see it as another defeat and go like, yeah, he probably should go. But kind of when you watch the game, and especially if you watch the highlights, you think, well, they had loads of chances, they just couldn't score. And there's only so much he can do at that point. Like, is someone going to come in and suddenly make these guys finish those chances? Like, I doubt it. So frustrating for them, but for Anderlecht, great to win without playing as well as they possibly could have, because they've now, with Union dropping points, they've caught up a little bit of space on that one.
Well, the good news for Charleroi is they were a fair bit better this week, in truth. But of course, losing means it doesn't matter. That's the really frustrating thing. The best I've seen them in kind of quite some time. And actually, to be fair, they gave it a fairly good go this weekend. The difference being Anderlecht actually murdered them by really taking their chances. Some of those chances being gift wrapped for them as well. Ben was mentioning Herv the Cat Coffee, who I think had quite a frustrating game, really. He particularly with his defence. Leaving him wide open, particularly in the Vasquez goal, which is just, that's just ludicrous. His reaction said as much. He can only gesture at his defence there to go, what can even I, the cat, do with that? And we know how good he is. We know how agile that body is. It's not that agile, unfortunately. Anderlecht taking full advantage of Union dropping points. And lapping that up to make things marginally more exciting come the end of this weekend. And of course, Kasper Dolberg ending that goal drought that was going on for far too long for his and Brian Reimer's liking.
Yes, his first goal in 10 league games, to put that also a bit more into context. And first away win for Anderlecht as well since that last goal that he made. Yeah, it was in the beginning of December, maybe the 1st of December, even against Westerlo in any case. And now also you touched on it as well, like 8 points behind Union. So that would mean if that gap stays the same, 4 points only in the playoffs. And I would say that Anderlecht have, without going into too much detail, but I would have a marginally easier schedule that you might see them maybe close that gap a little more. Probably not catch up, but completely. But maybe it's more likely that the gap doesn't get bigger and maybe gets smaller by the playoffs. And I don't know if this is a good or a bad thing, but yes, their levels, they are picking up too many points for the level they are playing still, like it's going on for almost the whole season. And whether if that doesn't stop, then that's probably good for him anyway. Maybe they can get their performance levels up and get back that up with the points. I do not know what to make out of this yet. I guess the outcome of the season might really say something there. It would not come completely unexpected by the expected goals and the expected goals against and expected points and all these kind of metrics, that they actually would fall down a bit more, regardless of maybe having, like I mentioned before, a slightly maybe more favorable fixture lists going to into the playoffs and inside the playoffs itself, of course, as well. That's where it all matters even more. And yeah, there looks to be that they really need to improve by the playoffs. They need to improve their levels. I would presume to have a realistic chance to fight. Even I'm not even saying to win the title, but at least to come relatively close. On Charleroi, well, you already mentioned it. Actually, they were playing quite well. Mazu also made 6 changes in his starting 11 compared to last weekend, partially because of Kofi being back from AFCON. I think there was another player as well. Yeah, Dabak probably also came from the Asian Cup. But in anyway, that's a lot of players, and they actually performed reasonably well. But efficiency, of course. Yeah, one thing we have to mention, I guess, it's again a referee thing, but this time it's at least a little bit less bad, and hopefully, at least, I hope for his health's sake, of course. But referee Lambrechts, got the ball really smack in the face from Torgan Hazard, which it is a funny moment to watch, but the consequences for him were not as funny. Like, admittedly, he resumed play after a while, but for only a few more minutes, and then he had to be subbed off anyway. So I hope he's actually doing okay. I don't mean to laugh with that, but the situation itself in a vacuum seemed quite funny. And yeah, at least that. I guess we need to touch on that, on the referees a little bit as well, on such moments, to not always put it in a bad light either.
Yeah, no, hopefully he will get better. It's one of those things you think surely someone would have been like, no, you need to come off like after seeing that, because that's got to hurt. Charleroi kind of run. They've got Leuven, they've got Genk, Westerlo, Cercle, and then Ghent. So if they play like that and they can just find the back of the net, they probably could pick up enough points. It's just the if factor with scoring goals for them is so big. And we talk about Anderlecht overperforming and all this. Do you without kind of knowing maybe Joris, maybe you'll know a little bit better than Scott and I. But Scott, maybe you know. Do you think this would be, and not sounding harsh, do you think it'd be like, in terms of the style of play and everything like that, would this be kind of like the worst or least aesthetically pleasing Anderlecht side to ever win the title? Do you think you'd be like, it's just like, do you know, it's really hard to say because you can't really say the worst team to win the title, because they win the title, they deserve to win the title. But like, you think of Anderlecht and you think of like kind of them and their history and the players they've got. Is there a team that you're like, or actually that this team is a bit more fun to watch than that team was back in the day? Or is this kind of the team that's like, if they won it, we're like, well, they've overperformed. But then have they overperformed? If they win the title, they haven't really overperformed, have they?
It's a good question. Like, I don't have a straight answer. Like, especially it makes it difficult considering team and well, and the players in itself, because I think the last time they won the title, it was also like the team performance was not that aesthetically pleasing, but they still had Tielemans and Den Donker, I believe. Yeah, so on a personal player level, that's still good, and that probably carried them towards that title as well in the end. Yeah, okay, that's what I can. That my 2 cents here already. But then just I'll need to have to give it a bit more thought as well. Yeah.
Any fans listening, and especially Anderlecht fans, let us know what you think. Like, I'm not saying it with kind of like a horrible way or anything like that. I'm just saying it more out of kind of like respect for the club. If you think how big that club is, and like some like you just mentioned there, Tielemans and Donker, like these are some quality players that have come through. And you look at this team, and it's like everyone's saying they're overperforming, everyone's saying they're not as exciting, but they're getting it done. Scott, I don't know if you wanted to jump in on that point or add anything to kind of ask people.
I think it's a really, really good question that Ben's asking, and a bit like Joris, I'm not entirely sure what the correct answer is. I think what's interesting for me is they've been very efficient this season, generally on the whole, after a really sluggish start. And for the majority of the season, I've found them kind of quite entertaining. So it'd be interesting to hear, you know, as Ben was saying, Anderlecht fans, please do get in touch with us and tell us where is this current side on the scale of entertainment from an Anderlecht point of view, because I found them kind of quite good to watch for a lot of the season. And I think Brian Reimer's instilled a real Anderlecht attacking intent back into the side, certainly for me, and they're generally going in the right direction, and we'll find out over the next couple of months whether that's ultimately the final destination is the one that they want it to be. But yeah, considering where we were with Anderlecht a year or so ago, then there's been massive improvement.
Yeah, quite unexpected, really, isn't it? I think we thought there could be a player for one side, but I don't think we saw them challenging for the title. And even when they signed the likes of Hazard, Delaney, you were kind of like, well, are they going to be fit enough to play? And like Hazard in recent weeks has started to really kind of have an impact on games and get some assists and goals and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's obviously a nice little thought-provoking thing. I'm interested to see where Anderlecht fans are, kind of where they are at on this side.
Maybe we're also getting a bit ahead of ourselves as well, of course. It's still a gap of 8 points and then 4 points. Like, whether they really will have that challenge, we'll have to see. But yeah, so far they're the closest challengers. That we have to admit. That's in itself already overperforming for now.
Absolutely. We kind of do have a listener question that's based around this anyway, so it's kind of we're just warming up for that as well. I'll call it that. A side that are definitely not challenging for the title and probably could very easily slip out of playoff one at Ghent. They hosted Cercle Bruges, and despite having an early chance and actually getting, Varlason was very, very busy in this game. He made some really, really good saves, a couple of iffy saves, but he kept the ball out, so that's all you can do at the end of the day. Despite that, Cercle did take the lead because, as we know, they don't need the ball to score goals. Just give it to them occasionally, they'll find a way to do it. Cross comes in, Leonardo da Silva Lopez, it's not an assist. I'm pretty sure he's heading it towards goal, but he heads it straight at Kevin Denke, and the form Denke's in, he's like, I'll just flip this into the back of the net to make it 1-0. 12th minute, Flavio Nazinho gets booked. 22nd minute, he gets sent off. I think I said last week, didn't about Noah Fadiga and how impressed I'd been when he came on, and he was actually really good in this game. He was quite lively. He was the reason Nazinho gets sent off, because he just dribbles past him and he gets taken out. Pretty silly from him so early in the game as well, after being booked in the 12th minute, to then get sent off in the 22nd. You think at that point, even Ghent in the situation they're in are going to be able to find a way to win this game, because they've got Hong back, they've got Tisu Dali back, like they're kind of getting some of those key players back. They do get themselves back into the game goals wise just after half time. Fadiga with the cross. The Pocher puts it in, and I don't know. It looks like he doesn't realise that. It looks like he's reacting to like a deflection, and he's going to like miss. He thinks he's going to miss the ball, but as like in his running stride, it seems to go in, and it's one of those things. If he'd miss it, it'd be one of the misses of the season because he's literally next to the goal. But he sticks it in, so it was nice to see him score, and I see him back amongst the goals. Unfortunately, he has a bit of a part to play in the second goal for Cercle Bruges. His header clearance just after the hour mark just kind of goes straight up in the air. It's headed on, brought down by Boris Popovic, who shows like midfielder-esque instincts to kind of bring the ball down, vision as well to find Kevin Denke. Denke, again, he's not going to miss. He puts it into the back of the net. Makes it 2-1 to Cercle Bruges despite only having 10 men. Denke with 20 for the season now. Nice little milestone for him. He put a nice little post actually after the game, kind of just saying how much he's enjoying playing with this current squad, the manager, the fans, the players, all that sort of stuff, like team cohesion that we know they've had for a long time. But yeah, Ghent really should have got something out of this game, but Vardason was just, I think he, from the kind of stats, made 9 saves, which is a lot, a lot of saves for him. So fantastic performance from him. Fantastic result for Cercle. They obviously jump above Ghent. There's a question about them in the top 6, so we'll get to that a bit later. But really kind of important win and just kind of showing a little bit of like a kind of passing of ways as they're going in their opposite directions, both these sides.
Yeah, the narrative was set up quite nicely coming into this game with Big Hein saying, look, Ghent really can't afford to lose this, otherwise we're going to potentially be in real trouble for a playoff 1 spot. And lo and behold, that's what happened. Ghent wasting so many opportunities. I mean, should have got something out of this game. And I have to say, for Cercle to pull off the win with playing with 10 men for so long, the resilience and the conviction in that side, we know it's there because we've seen it for a long time. This isn't new, but it absolutely typifies, I think, the real strengths of this side, that they can go there in circumstances like that and do something like that. And actually, they were on top up to the point when the red card came. Then you think there's a change in momentum, and there is to a certain extent, but Ghent just could not make it happen at all. And Big Hein really frustrated, particularly because they've got a busy schedule coming up now as well. They've got a couple of European games sandwiched in amongst some really tough fixtures before the playoffs. You know, they've got Standard Antwerp and Union on top of the 2 European games, and the only fixture in there that looks almost certainly winnable, and I even say that now with a caveat because of where their form's been recently, is the away fixture against Eupen. So it's looking quite difficult for Ghent at the moment, and Big Hein's got quite a few problems to wrestle with there. Cercle, incidentally, we know this already, but they've never lost more than 3 games on the bounce all season. So when they do hit a buffer of some kind, they correct it pretty quickly. And this is one of the results of the season for them. I think they were delighted with this afterwards because it really puts them in quite a good place going into the remaining fixtures now.
Yeah, and Muslic actually mentioned it as well. Like, this was probably one they didn't deserve to win either. It's like 2 shots on target, 2 goals. Yeah, I take it in the bag and leave, I guess. But yeah, that's yeah, very, very much it has to do with Ghent's inefficiency as well, as you touched on. Despite the Prata scoring his first goal in a year for the club, and like Ben mentioned, in what fashion as well. That's actually a nice way to end that goal drought, I suppose. Yeah, not much more to add. Denke, the first player to reach 20 goals this season. That's maybe one word to mention on its own, apart from the mentions he already got from you guys. And yeah, I guess I'm more or less answering a question there as well, but we'll get deeper into it. But yeah, 1 point only in 2024 for Ghent so far, being kicked out of the cup, and now this whole fixture list. I'll give away that they're my only hope for Genk actually to still reach the Champions playoffs. That Gent is actually even performing even worse, even though maybe the performance this time was not too bad. But yeah, it's either the efficiency, either the performance. There's always something there now in this game, and especially against the Cercle side being down to 10 men after 20 minutes already. Yeah, it was just all in all still just not good enough.
Yeah, those transfers, the January transfer window has just sucked all the kind of confidence out of the squad, hasn't it? It's just completely drained. I think, but then they go. Obviously, they go to Erpen next week. That this team should still beat Erpen. Like they've still got enough talent in there to beat Erpen. They've got Hong. They can create chances. They just need to put them in the back of the net. And
Well, the
Selena
only
might have a
game
busy game.
Antwerp lost this week, this year, was in Open though. So that's
Yeah,
well, okay. Now already, how many times we jinxed it back and forth now?
yeah,
I do not know, but just to mention, oh, anything is possible. I guess that's
yeah,
the
the
message.
beauty of this league. Another beautiful thing, of this league is also kind of like the opportunities it gives to teenagers, and like you look through the kind of the substitutes in this game. Obviously, Gendelman and Miange were the two kind of the only substitutes that came on that were over the age of 20. Abdul Rashid Ayinde came on for Ghent. He's like 18. Di Vliga came on. Augusto came on for Cercle. Like all these teenagers, Ekaleke, Litar, like all these teenagers coming on. And to be fair to Muzic, like his bench was very, very young. So I think, like you said, that kind of resilience thing, Scott, but to instill it in, like, for these teenage kids to like learn that at such like a young part of their career, it's going to be so important for them, kind of like as they go through their career. Like they've kind of had this such solid grounding, which is why I feel like Sousa must be like, what the hell is going on in Molenbeek? Because the cohesion that he probably felt when he was in Circle, like we saw him when we went, didn't we? When we went to visit, when Carlos showed us around, like Sousa was there recovering, and like the kind of they were just chatting. Like Carlos was like they were just chatting. What about? I can't remember what it was about. It was something about his home team had just won a game or something, like Sousa's team, and they were just chatting about it and stuff like that. And it's like, I'm sure that obviously goes on to other clubs. I'm sure Circle aren't the only club that like has that sort of connection between kind of sporting director and like injured player and stuff like that. But it kind of does permeate throughout everything that they do and stuff like that. Most of our questions, I believe, are for the Pro League. So I'm gonna go to those now, and then we'll jump to the Challenger, just so we don't lose momentum and our thoughts. Kind of off the back of this one, let's start with David Parks. David Parks, obviously, I think Anderlecht fan, and David obviously does write on Belgian football as well. But he asked about our thoughts on Cercle, Genk, and Ghent competing for the final playoff one places. Do you feel Cercle will be able to hold on to a top 6 spot, or do you think that Genk and especially Ghent will pull it together in time? Scott, go to you first on this one.
I think on the basis of form up till now, and that's the only thing we really should be going on, I think Cercle are probably going to do it and are probably the favourites. If it's not them, then I'm going to surprise Joris here and say that if it's not Cercle, I think his side Genk will do it. I think Ghent, I think things are just unravelling there just now, and I think their fixture schedule is colluding against them a little bit at the moment as well. So I think Cercle are going to do it, yeah.
Yeah, well, I would say the same. So, like, I guess I gave it away a bit before as well. Well, there's two of the three that would qualify as things stands. Of course, still possible that Sint-Truiden somehow gets in the mix, or even Mechelen. But yeah, let's go for the realistic scenario and the teams David proposed here as well. I would say the same. So, like, if Ghent can pull it back together, but it's not looking like it's only getting tougher for them, then they might still get there. And then that would be, I think, at the cost of Genk rather than Cercle. Yeah, that's the additional comment I give.
I think, yeah, we've also got to remember that Ghent are actually allergic to playoff one anyway in the past couple of seasons. So they'll probably drop into playoff 2, win playoff 2, and then they can still make Europe, can't they, with that stupid...
But they have a subscription on the 5th place as well, though, so that makes it more difficult now.
Yeah, and maybe they'll give that up to then win playoff 2 and still qualify for Europe. Although I have to say, I'm a bit concerned, like coefficient-wise, that they're gonna... Like they've got a game coming up this week, haven't they, in Europe against Maccabi Haifa, and don't really fancy them. Like, when the draw was made, I think we were like, yeah, no, they should be fine. But now I'm like, not really convinced that there's enough confidence in that side to beat Maccabi Haifa over 2 legs. But maybe they'll surprise us. We shall see. Thanks as always for your question, David. Gerb the King, or Jerb the King, who's a Genk fan, did actually reply today when he thinks it'll be 50% chance for Cercle, 35% for Ghent, and 15% for Genk. But I think he kind of says as well, it's going to be like are you just adding that up, Joris, in your head? Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, no, it does. I presume he'd done the maths, but I think it's kind of we're all kind of thinking Cercle will make it, and then one of the other two will just like stumble over the line and be in playoff one. But we're not expecting them to make much noise when they get there. Matchday Ball, long-time listener of the podcast. Do you think anyone can catch Union for the title? I feel despite being third, Club Brugge are the only team that I feel can put a consistent run together to properly challenge. Joris, I'll go to you first on this one.
I need to check how many points they are behind, but I thought we all thought so a few weeks back. So that's definitely true. And not that much has changed, I guess, even since in the points tally. But what is it, 15 points? They will need to have to close the gap before the playoffs a little bit more for that to happen, I think. So I would say, for me, Union are still the clear favorites. But, okay, also for them, indeed, the schedule is getting... it's going to get thicker and thicker, the schedule. So it's... we'll have to see how they hold on there. But I personally don't see a big challenge from any side, despite the playoff system. Of course, there will also be a little bit of artificial tension coming at the beginning, but although it's difficult to judge with this now being 10 games in the playoffs, but well, no, I don't see any real big challenge from any side, regardless of where they are in the standings and who they are as well.
Yeah, I think Union are clear favourites. I don't think any challenge, if there is going to be one that comes, I don't think it's going to be from Club, despite their pretty decent form for the most part for a while now. I think unless the gap narrows, as Joris was saying, further before the playoffs, then I think it's too big of an ask at the moment for Club to do anything. Anderlecht, on the other hand, could make this very interesting because, as Joris was saying earlier, their 5 remaining fixtures before the playoffs are pretty favourable on paper. So it's up to them to see whether they can do some damage and close things any further before then.
Yeah, as much as I want Union to kind of do it this year, I feel like it feels like it's been a long time coming, and maybe Alex Muzzy, obviously a friend of the podcast, as we should probably call him, will probably hope that I'm going to reverse curse them, as we're quite good at reverse cursing. I do think Club can get close. I just had there's something about that squad and Dyler and just kind of getting into the playoffs, and there's just that kind of mentality that I think that team kind of has around it, that it's going to be tough for teams to get points off of them. I can see them putting a run together. Whether that'll be enough, I don't know, but I think I see them more having that ability to do it over a consistent period, opposed to Anderlecht, where I can see kind of like a couple of injuries to kind of the defence, especially kind of scuppering any chance they'd have. But yeah, I agree with you guys that Union are obviously hot favourites with the way they've been playing, but these next couple of weeks will really kind of determine, obviously, how the playoffs look when we get there.
I think it's worth, just before we do the next listener's question, Ben, I think it's worth reminding everybody as well that I think how the fixtures fall for the playoffs is always very important as well. I mean, they're all big games, there's no doubt about that, but just sometimes the fixtures can fall slightly more favourably for you in terms of who you're playing. So we'll know more at that stage as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It always is kind of interesting to see how it's done. Obviously, last year it worked out pretty well because it was just dramatic all over the shop for that final game. So you just know the Pro League will be, guys in Pro League HQ will be praying they get a similar kind of ending this time around. Let's move to the other end of the table then. Blake, he asks us, we've seen 7 coaches sacked so far this season, mostly in the relegation zone. How much longer until Felice Mazu becomes the 8th, or does he survive? Scott, we were talking about this beforehand, weren't we? So I guess you can just go back over the little conversation we had and our kind of thoughts on this one.
I think if it was going to happen, it would have happened after this weekend. It hasn't, I think, because there was, as we were saying earlier, a pretty decent performance despite the result for them this weekend. And I actually think sacking him now before the end of the season, before we get to the playoffs, would be actually, in their case, far too risky. So I think there's less risk keeping Felice in post. He will, I'm sure, 100% agree with me and be waiting for that point so he can start prepare for next season.
Yeah, not much to add. Although I also have to admit, I do find it's a completely different topic, but I find the timing of Casapas sacking a bit weird after a game that you would lose most of the time anyway. And the same could be said if Charleroi would have done the same to Mazo against Anderlecht. And their level of performance was good enough, I guess, to keep him in for now at least. Yeah, I think he probably will stay. Maybe I could still see some team once the relegation playoffs are there, where they might still change specifically for these playoffs. I don't know if that's a smart thing to do, but I would not be completely surprised if that somehow still happens. Well, and if that case, if that would happen, it would probably be there, because I think the others indeed already changed managers, and in some cases might be in a good position. We'll have to see. But yeah, I can see some panic things going on, but I think at Charleroi now at the moment probably has passed. So tomorrow you'll read in the papers before we release this episode that Mazu is out at Charleroi. That's how it is.
Yeah, unfortunately, absolutely nothing we can do about that. I agree with you guys, and I agree with Joris. I think there is going to be a new manager in charge during the playoffs. It just feels like an urban thing to do. It feels
or an
urban.
Ivory Coast.
Yeah, I mean, they've shown it can work, apparently. There was someone in a German side did that in the Dritte Liga, I think. They made the playoffs, and then they sacked the manager that got them to the playoffs and appointed, I think it was Dirk Schuster, former Darmstadt guy. And I think he did get them for... Did he get him promoted? I remember wanting it to backfire because I thought this is the most stupid thing I've ever heard. Like Hamburg did it as well, didn't they? Actually, they made the playoffs once and they sacked someone to take over, and then they lost. And it's just like, what? Like, how can this possibly work? But someone will do it, and it'll be quite entertaining and exciting. But I think Mazu stays, but I'm not sure whether he gets next season. That's kind of my theory. I think he stays, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see where they go, because they've obviously all got these grand plans and all that sort of stuff. Kind of off-field stuff now. Jack Hacken Casapia enthusiast asks, what kind of strides, if any, has Union made with their youth academy? Considering how well the club have been running for the past seasons, it seems to me that they will need a greater number of youngsters coming through the ranks than they have now. Good scouting can't keep bailing them out. I think we mentioned this last week. I think I said that was kind of the next step I felt they needed to take, but you've got to really consider where they are in the kind of country, I guess, because they're literally next to Anderlecht, and Anderlecht will get probably the best players, and they develop the players better. So it might have to be one of those you just kind of you buy or try and bring in young talent from abroad to kind of bolster the academy along with some of the Belgian guys that you can get in there. But I can't, off the top of my head, guys, remember someone that's come through the academy. Like a lot of their young players we've known about because they've bought them in. They've bought these players over from places. And I think Jack's kind of right in the sense that they do need to have a decent academy, because at some point sometimes at some point the scouting will not work and you will miss on some of these players. I mean, they're not at the moment, or maybe they are on some of these guys, but they're not expensive, so it hasn't actually, you just don't really notice it, because the guys that they hit on they're so important, they kind of cover any sort of misses. But I wouldn't really call them misses, some of those kind of players that they've brought in that haven't really worked out, because again, it's always been kind of low risk transfers for them. But yeah, I don't know if you guys have a different opinion, but I feel like it's the next step of their kind of evolution into being this sustainable club that's competing at the top level of Belgian football going forward.
I think when you're developing an academy from so far behind the curve in comparison to some other clubs, it's difficult. It's going to be a slow process. It takes a lot of time to build something up to the level that they would want it to be at. So this is not going to happen quickly, although the club are very aware of that. They are, and it is on their radar. It's worth remembering as well that with pursuing the new stadium hard at the moment, it's difficult to juggle these two things. One has to take priority over the other, and I think in a way the stadium issue is probably the more pressing in the short term for them. I don't really really buy into Jack's argument about the recruitment bailing them out, because they've proved over the last 3 years they've been the best side at recruiting in Belgium. So everyone I know who isn't an Union fan is waiting for the recruitment to fail at some point, or for them to have a dip. But what they've proved, if anything at all, is that is probably their single biggest strength, and there's no reason to think that that's going to change anytime soon, which is just as well because of the lack of academy facilities at the standard that they would like. So it's a difficult one, but I think they're balancing it kind of pretty well on the whole for the moment.
They definitely are, but about Scott's point, thinking about the scouting, there was a point in time where I also still had that feeling about Gink's recruitment, but that has passed 2 seasons ago. So, unfortunately, but for on the positive for Union, they actually have like brought in Sadiki, for example, from Anderlecht, and they're also in that scouting. They also have the eye for the young talents, even close to them, and to pick the ones that are for some reason available to pick up, and they made a good choice there. They also they try to do that anyway. I think they also believed. I believe they also. Whoa, I don't know what I'm saying here, but forget this past 5 seconds. But yeah, I believe they also brought in, was it Ziani early on last season, and they tried Victor Bono a few seasons back as well from the second tier. I guess these are also players like there is a bit more hit and miss as well, though. Like with these two specifically, you can't really say they were a big success, and they might have been bought because, well, there is that homegrown rule, of course, player rule, so that they might need some as well. That's the main thing, I guess, why it's important for them as well to indeed not only rely on foreign specifically recruitment. But yeah, even on the Belgian market, they've not. The Van Houten, for example, as well. He was already a bit more proven as well, of course, than Sadiki. But they can also bring the right players from different Belgian clubs at the right moment in time as well. Yeah. That will be crucial to get one of those things right, I guess, like either the youth recruitment even at a younger stage and a younger age, or yeah, the developing players that are for some reason not getting any chance or not enough chances to their liking from other clubs that have good academies as well.
Yeah, kind of. Maybe not as similar, but obviously we've spoken about Circular a bit as well. They kind of have done a little bit of that, haven't they? Where they bring in these young kind of teenage players or young players from other Belgian academies. Like I think they brought in a couple of guys from Ghent. But then they do have a pathway for their academy players to come through as well. But they kind of had to set something up. I remember Carlos was saying, wasn't it? They had to kind of set something up to actually officially make the academy team part of their academy. I can't remember all the politics behind it and all the kind of like chewing and throwing they had to do to set that up, because they're a similar boat for them. Like Club Brugge, you obviously are very good at producing young players and they have a very strong academy, and you're kind of in that same sort of catchment area. So I think the context is quite important for Union, that you do have to remember kind of where they are in terms of that. And I think Joris, you're right in terms of they use their clever recruitment to pick up players from other academies that aren't getting the opportunities or aren't seen as being good enough to make it into the first team, but they think, actually, no, we can create a little pathway for them, and if they work, they work. If they don't, it's completely low risk. So, but I think then you're right as well, Scott, about the stadium thing, and I think, like, yes, they've got some financial backing, but it's not like they've absolutely loaded full of money that they can just do all these things at once. You've got to kind of process it all in and contextualize it and do all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, but great question. I think it's a really interesting question. I think it's something that is part of kind of the radar of looking at Union as being this big sustainable kind of pushing club. And I know if Alex is listening, maybe he wants to let us know kind of plans around that and stuff like that and things. We'd definitely be interested and happy to share that with people. Speaking of the second tier and picking up players from the second tier, Scott, let's quickly go over the Challenger Pro League this week.
Yeah, plenty happening there, as always. Quick score roundup, first of all. Denza and Patro Eisden drew 0-0 in what was a better game than it sounds Frank Moran's beat Club Next 2-0. Beveren beat Liège to deepen their worries 3-1. Anderlecht Futures lost 2-1 to Serang. Mbaile picking up his first win. And a really interesting point on Serang, obviously, is that's their first win since last October. No mean feat there. So big celebrations down Liège way with the Serang faithful this week. Zulte Waregem lost 3-0 to Lommel in a game that I saw this weekend. Young Genk beating Dender 2-1, Beerschot beating SL16 2-0, and Oostend losing 2-0 at home to RFC Liège, which leaves the table with Beerschot top with a 3-point lead now. They'll be grateful for that little buffer, 4 wins in their last 6. Denza second, Lommel up to third, beating Beerschot and Zulte convincingly recently as well. So they've had some really big results, 5 wins in their last 7 for the City Football Group owned club. Zulte are now out of the automatic promotion spots. They're down to 4th. And we should highlight that their home form has really been letting them down this season on the whole. That's where they've dropped most of their points. It's been a real problem for them. A little bit of disenchantment at Zulte as well. Vincent Everard getting himself into a little bit of bother this week, criticising fans, the board meeting to discuss his position, but he is going to stay in post for now. Beveren up to 6th and into a playoff spot, which they'll be delighted about. And as I mentioned, Serang having a big weekend as well. Oostend and SL16 into the drop zone. Ewan Henderson, who we mentioned earlier, who I know very well from his time in Scotland, seen a lot of Ewan, big fan of his. Top scorer for Oostend now with 4 goals, 3 in his last 5. And the other bit of news is Liège still haven't appointed you a new T1 yet. What's happening? 3 points from the drop zone and winless in 8. What are you doing, guys?
They are in trouble, aren't they? Massive trouble.
I have another question. I don't know if you guys saw it, but goal or no goal for Serra's first goal against Anderlecht Futures? That's a really important question. It could be even vital throughout the rest of the season. For the rest of the season, or at the end of the season as well. There was a ball, Triebwaba headed it, and it's not very clear if it was cleared on or after behind the line. I guess we'll never know the answer, but it's really tough call for sure. I'm not blaming anyone for that. It's with no VAR being there and no goal line technology anyway. That would have been even more helpful here, but that very questionable, or not necessarily questionable, but a decision that could have a lot of consequences there, given the outcome of that game as well.
If that's a situation at the end of the season, I'm sure someone will complain about it if Serang stay up and be like, we want that game replayed.
It's Belgium, folks.
No, I think yes, you're just kind of it's very concerning, isn't it? Seeing kind of that slide and then that no appointment of manager and stuff like that. I mean, it's a little bit concerning, but the top is just ridiculous at the moment. It's so exciting. I saw one Patro complaining as well because the referee was from near Denza or something. I was like, does that mean does he support them? I don't know if he actually supported them, but just being from near somewhere, I mean, doesn't really matter. Belgium's a small country.
It was not even that near, to be honest.
Was it not?
Well, relatively. I guess 10 miles, 15 kilometers or so. But still, given the context, it's not that near. If it's near, I would really assume he's actually from that town or the city specifically. But that's not even the case.
It doesn't even mean he supports them, does it?
My favourite bit about that whole event, guys, was the 2 clubs releasing competing statements within minutes of one another. The whole tit for tat whataboutery around something that wasn't even really an issue, I'm pretty sure was quite funny to me.
Yeah, and then the game finishing 0-0. Complete anticlimax. So we've got one final question that we teased a couple of weeks ago, didn't we? And then I completely forgot to actually say it. So apologies to Robert Sherwood, who got in touch. It's a really good question, to be fair. So I think we needed to give it a little bit of time, although we've been speaking for a long time already on this podcast. But bear with us. It's a good one. He said, looking at the cities where there are multiple clubs, obviously in Belgium, what's the difference between fans of Club Bruges against Cercle Bruges? He says, I can understand the situation in Brussels a little bit better, but if you're not from Molenbeek or St. Giles neighbourhoods, why would you choose Anderlecht? Thanks, and he enjoys our work. Nice,
Good to
over
know.
to you. Yeah, no, over to you. Like, kind of great little question about kind of the difference between fan bases and stuff like that. It's such an interesting topic, isn't it? And there's so many interesting books about cities with two clubs and how these clubs have different. It's like the political stuff, or maybe it's religious stuff, or anything like that. Scott, obviously, you know that from where you are and the club you support. There are very much clear divisions between the fan bases and stuff like that. So it's something that's really interesting. It's interesting to hear how that affects Belgian sides as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth pointing out here, I'll just assume that listeners don't necessarily know anything. And it is a brilliant, brilliant question, this one. We probably could have talked for 2 hours on this one alone, and may do yet at some point. But Cercle, for those who don't know, are traditionally a Catholic club, which doesn't mean all of their supporters are Catholic, of course. Ben referenced where I am. I'm based in Scotland, just outside Glasgow. And, people will know about the relationship between Celtic and Rangers and the big religious divide there, which is a big thing for some people, not so much for other fans. It's not something that goes right across the board, but Cercle are historically speaking, a Catholic club. They are the smaller of the two clubs. It's worth pointing out historically as well that Club Bruges, up until the 1970s, don't really figure that much in any real significance, in truth, within Belgian football. So it's only really within the last 40, 45 years that Club Brugge have become a force of any kind at all, which is interesting sort of in itself. Up to that point, Cercle really arguably are the main Bruges side, even though they don't have a massive history in terms of winning silverware in that sense. But the clubs are very different in their approach and ethic, and those of a Cercle persuasion will tell you, as the club told us when we visited them, that a lot of the local Bruges residents, those who stay, in the centre of the city and within the city boundary, are actually Cercle fans, and a large proportion of the club fan base comes from outside Bruges itself, which isn't a criticism in any way at all. It's just a symptom of obviously a bigger club. On the Anderlecht point, briefly, the interesting thing for me there is obviously it's the history and the heritage. Anderlecht have been around for a long time and have done a lot. They are historically probably the most well-known Belgian side. In terms of silverware, they're still the most successful. So that in itself means that the fan base is developed outside of Belgium from quite an early point. The other Brussels clubs, the Molenbeeks, the Union Saint-Gilloise of this world, obviously smaller fan bases, but we should point out Union do have a growing fan base outside of Brussels, in Saint-Gilles on the south side of the city, and outside of Belgium itself, and that's got much more to do with the identity of that club and the appeal that has. But God, what a brilliant question. Shame we can't talk more about that one tonight.
Yeah, it is maybe worth pointing out, of course, yes, Cercle Bruges are Catholic, but it's in no means comparable to the Celtic Rangers divide there.
Good point.
Club Brugge and Cercle, the religion plays a little role, I guess, in a bit in the identity of the clubs themselves, but not necessarily on like the big rivalry as well. Club Brugge is then, in comparison, then a little bit more liberal originally. I do not know how much that still plays a role currently as well, anyway. But historically, it has been like, well, the longest, one of the longer, running city derbies, specifically in the most played city derbies at the highest level. Let's say put it like that in Belgian football. Of course, in recent years in Brussels, there have been a bit more as well, but that had been gone for a long time. So that, and in Antwerp as well, it comes and goes a bit with either Antwerp or Beerschot or both at the same time, having some struggles over quite a long time now already as well. So recently we had it, and maybe we'll have it again next season. But the city rivalry is probably bigger, but that's also because the city is a bit bigger, so that both fan bases are slightly bigger. And on the Cercle Brugge fan base as well, don't want to mean anything bad with that either, but like in numbers, probably even inside Bruges, it's despite everything, it's still more Club Brugge fans. But there's a smaller proportion of their fans because there's just so many more fans. I guess something like that. That's probably a little bit of the way how you look at it. But it's of course true that success brings supporters has brought supporters for Club Brugge in recent years. Also, maybe it's still worth pointing out historically, Cercle Brugge indeed. Well, Scott touched on that a little bit. Like, was actually in the beginning the more successful club until quite okay. The 70s is not that recently anymore, I suppose. But into history scene, like relatively recently, and when we also obviously with when football was less commercialized or not commercialized at all, even that's when Cercle were the leading side in Bruges, and actually briefly in Belgium for a very short time that must have been a century ago or so now, I guess, as well. But that peak has been left behind, and now it's difficult for them to keep the fan base. Well, there is actually a good fan base, but it's to keep it growing. It's a different story, of course, in current times as well. I'll not blame, but I'll mention how society has changed and over the recent years as well. Anyway, recent. It's an ongoing evolution since a long time, but the commercial evolution of football definitely helps a lot in that.
Fantastic. That was really interesting. Thanks, guys. They're interesting to hear about kind of that, like historical divide. There is a book on general Belgian history that I'm currently reading by Samuel Humes, I think it is, which touches a little bit on kind of that Catholic liberal divide at the political level and how it's not necessarily, and that would have played out in the football clubs in the early stages and stuff like that. So if people are interested in a little bit of Belgian history, it's an academic-y type book, so be prepared that they aren't always the easiest to kind of get your kind of teeth into, but it is quite interesting if you are interested in kind of the broader Belgian history, and then you can kind of fit the football teams into that context and stuff like that, and the kind of divide with the Netherlands and all that sort of stuff. But that is not for this podcast. That is probably the end of this podcast. It's been a long one, but hopefully we've got to all your questions. We really do love when people reach out with questions, some really, really cracking questions, as always this week. So please do send them in again next week because, we just absolutely love answering them. Guys, thank you so much once again for joining me. It's been great fun, as always.
It has, an absolute delight. And just before I go, I'm going to give a big shout out to one of my 3 cats, my little wingman Zorro, who's been sleeping really peacefully immediately to my right, literally touching my laptop here, and he hasn't ruined this podcast in the slightest. So big shout out to the wee man. We'll see if he wants to make an appearance next week.
Kudos to him, and time to wake up now as well. To wake him up then, I guess. Is it him? I guess with that name. Yes, the Scott is giving me the thumbs up there for the people that are just listening.
I love a cat called Zorro. That's such a great name. But anyway, if you've enjoyed this episode and you like what we do, please do leave us a review on your podcast app of choice, or consider giving us a little donation on Buy Me a Coffee. You can find the link on our social media as well. As always, thank you for listening to this episode, and we'll speak to you soon on another episode of the Belgian Football Podcast.